Hey guys, in this video we're going to see if we can create some kind of musical output using OpenAI's API. It could be, or the goal would be to create like a lo-fi generator for me, some music to listen to while programming or something like that. Um, so this was just an experiment. The way that I approached it in this case, there's many ways you can approach it. It's not a dedicated music model uh, creating that's trained on lo-fi music and creates lo-fi music. It's actually just using a large language model like GPT-4. You could also drop in an open source model like Llama from Facebook or one of the other ones. Uh, in a similar case. But basically, what we want to do is to be able to provide it a prompt and it outputs a natural language representation of the music, which you can then use various scripts and whatnot and libraries to translate that to a MIDI file. And of course, MIDI files, as people in the know in the MIDI world, the MIDI output is only as good as the instrumentation or samples that you use. In this example, I'm just going to use some free, low-cost samples, which sound, like a quite cheap, just piano and organ and synth and stuff like that. And then there's no professional mixing. There's nothing. This is just some code that I've written in Python, which integrates with OpenAI, and then also uses the Python class pretty MIDI to convert the representation, JSON representation output into a MIDI file that can be edited or listened to or played back in, say, GarageBand or another platform. I'm using a Mac OS Mac Mini, M1 Mac Mini to create this video and also this software. So this is just an experiment. I hope you enjoy the process, and I'll show you what I've written. I've already probably spent about half a day on this, messing around with GPT-4 to help me write the code, as well as to create the musical representation. So the goal here is to create a single Python class that I can pass in, say, a theme and output a MIDI file, essentially. And I'll switch to my desktop now, and we can have a look on how it works. I won't be coding it. You won't be joining me on the coding journey because it does take a long time to create these things. I think it's already a couple hundred lines of code. But of course, I'll show you roughly how the modules put together, and I'm not here to promote anything. This is just a fun thing for me to do on my holidays, so I thought I would do it. The output I'm not overly happy with, and I could definitely improve this significantly, but it's an interesting primer to see whether large language models can actually produce a general representation of music in the form that we want it. All right, so I'll switch over to my coding window now. Okay, here we are. So we are in VS Code, and I've already developed this code. It's around 300 lines long, but I'll roughly walk through it quickly with you and show you the output. This should be a pretty short video. So, as mentioned, I am using Pretty MIDI to translate the output into a legible MIDI file, and I'm using the OpenAI API to call the latest GPT-4 model to help compile the musical representation. And I've sort of been, when I first created this, I created this with the idea to create some lo-fi music. Not 100% sure whether it's done that, but we'll listen to it later and we can see what it's actually created. I just realized I've got some lights that I could put on here to make it a little better. All right, so let's go through. I'll just walk through the outline of the project, and if you're interested, I can put it up on GitHub or something, and people can take it from there and enjoy it, mess around with it. It's a pretty fun little project. So the first part was just defining the class is the low-fi generator, and then within inside that we've got the initialization of that class. So whenever that class gets initialized, these are the parameters we want to set. I've got a duration parameter and a theme parameter. Just set some default values there. And then we also set some instrument mapping. The reason why I have this in place is because GPT-4 has no idea what instruments can be mapped, what they're called exactly in the Pretty MIDI library. And there's lots of possibilities. So what I've done is when I send in the initial prompt into ChatGPT is I give it a list of values that it can use so that I can, in the output, then map that directly to a Pretty MIDI instrument. So it maps to the correct instrument. Otherwise, the instrument won't get found, and then it basically just misses that instrument altogether. So yeah, I've just got some more logic around mapping the instrument when I basically pass in these values, just standard English names, and these are the names in Pretty MIDI that they get mapped to. And I do have a little flag if it's a drum or not whatnot. Never really got drums working 100% yet, but it's interesting. Most of the time I just go default. If the instrument's not found, I just default to the grand piano. So this is the main class which calls GPT. And in this class, this is the prompt. It's a pretty significant prompt, but I'll read it to you and you can see where I'm coming from. So the goal here is to generate a detailed JSON formatted composition guideline for a long duration lo-fi music track. So I should also mention, so the purpose of this is to use a single prompt to compose the whole script. To compose the whole music track, at least in a number of bars that we can repeat and layer. So eventually the output is not just a repetitive track, which it's got to actually be interesting. It's got to have some kind of progression, and then some interesting melodies that don't just simply repeat the first few bars and then just repeats again, which is very easy when you're automating stuff like this to get very repetitive. So the goal is to focus on chord progression plus corresponding MIDI notes. So you may need to understand a little about music here, but this I personally am not a musician, so I didn't fully understand this sort of stuff. But just after a bit of research and using GPT, it explains quite well what common chord progressions are for lo-fi music, and you need to actually map them to corresponding MIDI notes. So I'll explain that in the structure of the example that I feed it soon. So we do chord progression plus corresponding MIDI notes, creative melodies plus corresponding MIDI notes, instrumentation, drum patterns, and overarching theme. The melody should have a variety of rhythms, phrases, and include some notes outside the scale for color. Please create motifs and develop them throughout the track. Use techniques like syncopation, I think I said that, syncopation, dynamics, and articulations to make the melody expressive and unique. Each chord progression should have at least 3 to 5 chords, and the melody should complement it. Provide specific, actionable instrumentation for each section. All sections should blend well in terms of theme, beat, and song composition. Here is a strict list of known instruments to select from. And that, as I mentioned before, is just a complete list of instruments provided in this class mapping here, data class mapping. If choosing drum instruments, be sure to include the drum pattern field. For drum patterns, use general MIDI drum key numbers to represent each drum type, like kick for 36, close hat for 42, open hat for 46, acoustic snare for 38, and so on. So these are quite known things that turns out GPT does have knowledge of, which is great. Specify the timing and velocity for each drum hit to create a rhythm. Note, the output must be in JSON only. Example of an expected output format. So it took me a while to iterate on this for a while, and some of these things I personally didn't know about, so I just had to research them and understand why it would be useful in the prompt to begin with. And here's kind of an example output that we want. We want a tempo of 90 beats per minute, a time signature of 4/4, and then it breaks it up into sections. So you got introduction. The progression is C major 7, MIDI, and the MIDI note. So that's the first progression. And then the second progression is A minor 7, MIDI, and then it's got the MIDI note there. So description is a smooth and mellow progression to start the track. Instruments is a piano and synth pad. And then likewise, we have then a build-up with a slightly different progression, and main with a different progression. I don't think this conforms to known music theory, because once you listen to it, you realize, wow, actually, most tracks have a progression that repeat throughout the entire track, whereas this is introducing multiple progressions. So that part of it I'm not too sure about. If you guys know any more about music than I do, perhaps you could enlighten me. So that's quite interesting. So some examples with the drum pattern is I would have, when it includes a drum instrument, it includes the drum pattern, which has the pitch, 36, start time, velocity, and so forth. Also, it includes the melody key, which will have the pitch, start time, end time, velocity, and so forth. So these probably aren't the best examples. Probably the best thing to do is somehow translate a known track in that is good into an example here. For me, I've just created these from trial and error, and when I play this back, it isn't great music. So I think this is probably my biggest weak point is this structure. It should be of something that already sounds pretty good, but you have to translate something to do that. Which I believe there's some tools to help you do that online. I was going through a lot of rabbit holes on GitHub, and some people have put a lot of work towards this stuff. So it's quite interesting. And so yeah, we've got drum pattern and melody. And then I've always said more progressions as needed, more melody notes as needed. And then there's just a theme, a journey through a day from dawn to dusk, capturing the mood of different times. So it calls OpenAI, calls it GPT task. Its GPT task is just a simple helper function that I have, which basically just calls the model. So the new model, GPT Vision Preview, this is the task, GPT task. You don't need this for this task. You basically just need the normal model. I'm not doing any vision stuff at all, but the Vision Preview model does also support your standard large language inputs. But this is designed to support, this helper function is designed to support various use cases, which can support reading some of the vision capabilities as well. So you can see some of the encoding images and stuff like that. And then this is where the actual call happens. goes chat completions with backoff, which is using a backoff library, because we all know OpenAI API goes down quite often. So yeah, we define the max tokens and provide the response format as JSON object if the JSON output. So there's an input here called JSON output. It's true or false. If the JSON output set to true, it sets this variable. Then we send this prompt in as messages. We've got a system prompt and we've got a user message prompt. I'm not really discussing the system prompt too much in this video, but we could definitely improve the output by tweaking the system prompt to say, hey, you're an expert lo-fi music composer, and you love writing music using chord progressions and melodies, and you know what works and what sounds great. You could improve things that way. All right, so then we've just got some logic to clean the output. The output contains some weird characters most of the time that we strip out of it, and then we return the response. So I'll just skip to the bottom and I'll show you how I'm calling this. So I'm basically just calling this as a script, which means I can just run it as you normally would a Python function. You type in Python. In my case, you could just go the file name Python. I've got it in a folder called tools, and let me see, tools, and then I've just got this file name called lo-fi gen. So if you run that, I've got input duration, theme relaxing, generator, generate MIDI. So generate MIDI function is the main function. This is what ties in all the methods above it in this thing. So we initialize the MIDI, the pretty MIDI function. We pull out the known instruments from the mapping from the init function, the initialization function, and then we run the GPT prompt with OpenAI. Then from that output, we pull out the BPM, the time signature, and we've got the beats per bar. We calculate that, the seconds per beat, seconds per bar, and then we do set the tempo for the MIDI instrumentation. So we set the initial time of 0, and then through each composition we're adding, defining the bars, and then adding each instrument to the bar. So I'm looping through each section that is returned in the OpenAI call, and then we are adding each instrument and adding the melodies. We add the drum pattern, the melody, and the progression to the section. And we've got this function called add instrument, which does the heavy lifting there for us. It gets the MIDI program number for the instrument and adds the instrument to pretty MIDI. If it's a drum, it goes through and sets the drum parameters. If it's a chord progression, it finds the instrument and adds the parameters like the velocity and the pitch for those things as well. You'll see here, this is the output. This is an example output. I'll just expand this. So that's my prompt. Generate a detailed JSON format. Here's the example. And this is the direct output. It's in JSON, and we have the tempo, time signature, theme, a journey through a day, dawn to dusk, capturing a mood at different times. It's probably overfit a little bit because of how specific my example was, but it does give you the progressions, gives you the instruments, the melody, and the drum pattern. And then it does that in the next section is name, morning, progression, description, instrument, melody, drum pattern, afternoon. The section names are irrelevant, really. and then it has instruments, melody, drum pattern. And then we have, again, evening, progression, instruments, melody, drum pattern. And so you could essentially repeat these for the duration as much as you want. So you could build a hour-long track, and it will repeat these. And possibly you could add ways to add more variation into these as well. So I haven't explored that. You could easily spend weeks on this project. But for now, that's kind of the output, and you can see roughly how we are translating that to a physical time. We're basically layering each instrument in, and then writing the MIDI file at the end. And we're doing this while the track is less than the duration. So yeah, it's an interesting project. I do have the example here, so let's have a listen to it. All right, let's have a look. And it looks like my screen is frozen. So I've loaded it into GarageBand, so we can have a little listen to it. Hopefully it will work. Give me a second, I'll just hit play. So the drums are a bit off, but it is quite interesting. It's got a 4-bar progression. I apologize for the frozen cam. I don't know what happened there. So I've got a B cam here, which isn't anywhere near as good, but I'll just put this on so you can see me. So we've got the chord progression there, and so the first bar, you should be able to hear it through my microphone. So chord progression has 4 notes, and then it goes in, the first chord progressions goes in, and then the next chord progression. No, this is actually not the direct example I showed you, the output of the GPT. Just because this is a file that I had already, which actually sounded half decent. But the next step is the next bar, next section. So that had a grand piano melody, which you heard. That was quite simple. That's the grand. And then it's got, of course, the chord progression. It also added upright bass with the same chord progression. I did have some drums in there, but the drums, there's an issue with the drums. The timing's not right. Then it created the next section. Which was interesting. So same thing, created 3 different, dream voice, roots rock, and a brass chord progression with a melody of the grand piano. Then this is the coolest sounding one. It goes into same sort of thing, has acoustic guitar and grand piano as the chord progression. Very bold, and then it adds a melody, Steinway grand piano. Oh, sorry, I'll just go back a little bit. So yeah, it was an interesting experiment, and if you are interested in taking some of the code, let me know. I'll be happy to put it on GitHub, and you can use it in a Creative Commons type way and build on it. And I'm excited to see what you build with it. So yeah, thanks for your time and looking forward to seeing you in the next video. See ya. Bye.